Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Katie Shelton. I am a partnership consultant with Reading Horizons, and I will be hosting the webinar for today. As many of you know, we are currently at the peak of a massive ELA adoption cycle. For many of you, this isn't just about buying new books or new curriculum, it's about navigating a big shift and how we teach our children to learn how to read. We know the pressure is real, we know the science of reading buzzwords are everywhere, and the stakes for our students is high. It's always been high, right? Today, we aren't here to talk about specific brand names or shiny product demos. Today, we are here to pull back the curtain on the process of choosing a program and successfully implementing it in districts. We want to explore how curriculum leaders balance the gold standards of research with the messy reality of classroom implementation. Our goal is to move past the marketing and help you build a rubric that prioritizes teacher buy-in and long-term student success. To help us navigate these complex waters, we've assembled a panel of experts who aren't just making decisions at the district level, they're actively shaping that literacy landscape in their respective states. So, first, joining us from Oklahoma, we have Amber Mann Elder. Amber is the elementary ELA curriculum coordinator for Putnam City Schools. She also serves on the board of directors for the Reading League Oklahoma. Amber brings a unique perspective on how to bridge the gap between high-level science of reading advocacy and the daily reality of a large, diverse district's academic services. Welcome, Amber. Next, we have Dr. Josh Tremont, the Executive Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment at Chapel Hill ISD in Texas. Dr. Tremont is a seasoned systems leader who understands the big picture of adoption, how ELA isn't just a siloed choice, but a decision that impacts the entire instructional ecosystem, from assessment structures to long-term district growth. We are excited to have you here, Josh. And finally, we are joined by Jill Erfourth. I messed it up again, Erfourth from Michigan. Jill is the District K through 6 Literacy Consultant and Elementary ELA Co-Chair for Utica Community Schools and a trained letters facilitator. As a past president of the Michigan Reading Association, Jill has a bird's eye view of how statewide literacy trends and policy changes ultimately reach a teacher's desk, and she has spent years mastering the art of sustainable implementation. Welcome, Jill. All right, we are going to start with some questions that we have prepared for our panelists, but we also want to hear from you, so we do have a Q&A feature that you can utilize. And at the end, as we have time, we want to get to some of your questions as well. So kicking us off, the first question I have, when you are planning an evaluation, who do you include in the decision committee to ensure you have different perspectives? And I'd like to hear from Jill first on this one.
Okay, thank you for having me. You mentioned teacher buy-in, so of course, thinking about all the stakeholders, of course, classroom teachers. I would also say when we think about classroom teachers, a variety of experiences, newer teachers, veteran teachers, depending on the size of your district, if you have, one building up to 25, as in my case, a variety of demographics as well. So when we think about those classroom teachers, taking those things into consideration, of course, if possible, one from every grade level, if not two, so that they can collaborate. Going through the process, multilingual teachers, special ed. So again, just thinking about all those stakeholders, administrators, having one to, two administrators, literacy coaches or instructional coaches, if you have those in your district, and district leadership, curriculum directors, district leadership that are involved in the process and decision-making from a systems level.
Sounds like quite a few people you're including that process, Jill. That's amazing. That's awesome. Do any other panelists want to add on to any of that? Anyone different that you've included in your process?
Yeah, I would also say we typically include a board member in that process as well. And so especially once we kind of, our teachers have the most input in our district, but once we really get down to the last couple of choices, we really encourage a board member to come and do that as well and have a say in that. They're a big support. And then also we have at least a parent or a couple of parents come to get their input as well.
I love it. Good addition, Amber. Thank you. Next question. What outside resources do you use during the evaluation process, such as consultants, third parties, etc.? We'll start with you, Josh.
So before the evaluation process, we partner with our regional service center and we've developed some literacy and numeracy frameworks that are aligned to research-based instructional strategies. Beyond those, something that we find very helpful at Chapel Hill is visiting neighboring districts that may have already implemented a program that we're considering. Of course, we want to lean on the alignment to our frameworks, but it really helps us in practice when we get to speak with other district campus leaders, classroom teachers. Oftentimes, they've allowed us to view live instruction, participate in PLCs, and we really just lean on them for outside expertise to inform our decisions, but ultimately, we rely on ourselves to decide which one we like to adopt.
I love that because it's one thing to see a program and dive into it. It's another to see it in the classroom with students, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Jill, anything you would add to that?
I would just piggyback off that, but we have an intermediate school district, so similar. So we have a large county, and we, again, in Michigan, going through this process with new legislation. We have several districts that, like Josh said, that we are able to tap into and utilize those as an additional resource outside. And then again, the decision making though within the district.
Awesome. Amber, anything you would add?
We also use the curriculum evaluation guides that the Reading League puts out, just to identify red flags, green flags, and then also we use the Reading League Oklahoma as a good source because it is specific to what we're looking for in Oklahoma. So I would highly encourage that as well.
Agree. Those compass reviews and rubrics are super helpful. Love it. When evaluating a curriculum, how do you weigh, and this is kind of on a similar topic of seeing it in classrooms, right? How do you weigh strict alignment to the science of reading against that practical usability? Here's the kicker for a first year teacher,
Yeah.
focusing on those brand new ones. Amber, go ahead.
Right. So, we do go through the process of really looking and making sure that the science is and the evidence is solid. So that, that's non-negotiable. But on our committees, like Jill said, we want all different experience levels, and something that we're very intentional about is having some of our teachers that might be a first year teacher or an emergency cert teacher, someone that really can look at it through that lens for us. So, with experience, I'm going to look at something completely different than that alt cert teacher will. So we want to make sure we have that. And then also we have our teacher teams look at that. All of our teacher teams in our sites look at the curriculum as we narrow it down. So just really actually getting their input. And then we create our own rubric, and that's a whole section of the rubric. Can you pick it up and follow it along? Something super important, and especially now, curriculum is getting better and better. Are there embedded learning opportunities within the curriculum itself? So if you think about your structured literacy, honestly, I'm still learning about what that looks like. So when you go to teach R controlled vowels or whatever it is, you may have, learned whole language when you were growing up, and now you're coming as an alt cert teacher, emergency certified teacher, and you have no idea why ER says, or an Erfourth, right? But now I need to make sure that my teachers have that support. Really, veteran and new teachers have that support built right within the curriculum. And then also, just what does that look like for my students? So is that cognitive science built into it as well? Are those instructional routines built in? So are the students just sitting and getting, or are there enough opportunities for students to respond? So I'm not now dealing with classroom management, which would be a usability issue as well.
So I heard things like embedded professional learning, student engagement. can every teacher pick this up and feel like an expert? And I liked your call out that it could be teachers who have been around for a long time, but maybe we're still learning some things like myself. So that was a good call out as well. Josh and Jill, what would you add to that, if anything?
I would just add, it makes me think of the perspective of scripted curriculum. And it can have a negative perspective, but however, especially for first year teachers, that scripted curriculum really is lifting some of that work of the professional learning because it's scripted, but yet teachers are still able to make those instructional decisions, which has to be communicated to the teachers. But that scripted curriculum really does provide, like Amber was using that, example of teaching those spelling sound correspondences, just one example, or explicitly teaching vocabulary. Those routines are part of the script, if you will, which I think really helps first year teachers and veteran teachers as we do make a shift to structured literacy and some of the pedagogy and instructional practices.
That makes sense. And then you're aligning to the research because it should be baked into that script, right?
Yeah, and I'll just extend that to at the district level. We really want equitable instruction across all classrooms. We don't want to lower the expectation and the standards in our veteran teachers' classes, but we also don't want to see a disparity of instruction in a first year teacher's classroom. And so I think having that strong adoption allows both teachers, in either point of their career to rock it.
I love it. How can districts look beyond high gloss marketing and big name reputations to determine whether a program actually meets your specific demographic needs? We'll start with you, Amber.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that things can look shiny and pretty, and you can slap a science of reading label on anything, right? You can pull out something that says science, but we also know that doesn't mean that it always is completely aligned with the science of reading or the evidence-based instruction that we need. So what we do again is we're very intentional about taking a look first before we even look at the curriculum at what our district needs. We have a very diverse population of students. We've got about 19,000 students. We have 28% of them are EL. We have 72 different languages. I mean, it's a huge lift, and all of our sites have different needs. So we take a look at that, and then we do create our own kind of rubric, like what do we need to focus on? What do our sites need? How many new teachers do and then we kind of take that, into consider. We're intentional about that first, and then we take the curriculum and really look at those components. So it starts with, and usually you're like, oh, this looks really great, but once you really dig into those very intentional, purposeful elements, it's really easy to look past that beautiful glossy piece and say, there really aren't the multilingual learner supports in this program that I need. There really isn't the explicit instruction that I need. This vocabulary routine does not match with the science. The student engagement is not there. And so if we're very intentional first about what we're looking for, then we can very easily then go in and just dig in and see if does this meet our needs?
And looking at it with that very specific lens that your district created. That makes sense. And I know I've been in my consultant role for almost 5 years, and the difference between that teacher knowledge in the last 5 years has gone up exponentially, that the teachers can go in and say, oh, tell me about how this MLL tip is specific to this lesson, and tell me about this vocabulary routine. So that's been really neat to watch our teachers flourish too. Awesome. Josh and Jill, anything you would add to that?
I would just add, as part of the process, we started with a smaller committee to kind of narrow down when we were looking, when we started the pilot process. So that small committee still had the teachers and some of those stakeholders, but it was a smaller committee so that we could really, looked at like 13 different, heard from 13 different curriculum companies and like you said, the shiny, the sticker on the outside, but then when we started digging in using the rubric, we use the Reading League evaluation tool. Extremely, extremely helpful when we talk about aligning to research in the science of reading. But we did start with a small committee before our larger pilot committee to narrow that down, to dig into some of those curriculum before we presented it.
Makes sense. Great. Beyond those standardized test scores, of course, what are the qualitative indicators that a new ELA curriculum is actually working in those first 12 months? Josh.
So I think the larger the district, the more difficult it is to get 100% unanimous consensus on adopting a program. But really, the lift starts once you've identified, selected a curriculum and implementing it. And so then it shifts towards instructional look-fors. At Chapel Hill, we like to see students do the cognitive heavy lifting. We spoke earlier about our literacy framework, and so we like to see evidence-based, text-based discourse amongst our students. And really, I think, if we're teaching curriculum correctly, then we're seeing a reduced teacher-created materials in classrooms, such as teacher pay teacher and some of those things. We spoke earlier about the strength of curriculum that's out there right now, and um, but PLC conversations that are anchored in the curriculum itself rather than Pinterest or after school activities or different social events. But really for leaders, it's if every classroom looks wildly different, then implementation is likely very shallow. And so those are the things, from year to year, you may have different assessments. And so it's hard to look quantitatively at curriculum and the effectiveness right off the bat. And so we like to do one pagers in those curriculum look fors. We like to walk hand in hand with our administrators and just work on calibrating, is this effective instruction or what's the highest leverage strategy that we can coach our teachers on improving?
I love that. And empowering those administrators to be doing those frequent walkthroughs to look for it. I liked when you said that shallow implementation too. That really resonated. Jill and Amber, anything else you'd add to that? Okay. We often hear about alignment, but what do you do when the priorities of the district office, the school board, and the classroom teachers feel misaligned? Amber, what do you think?
Well, the first thing I can say is take a deep breath because that's really not a unique place to be. In fact, it's probably the place where a lot of people are. And so what do you do when you're there? And I think really kind of where you start is just with the barriers. I mean, it's kind of like when we think about like our classrooms. So, what are things in our control and out of our control? And then that's where we're going to start. So, what are some things in our control? Well, there are leaders at some level, at some breadth, that understand and get it and are ready to jump on board with you, that have a growth mindset, and start there. Start building culture somewhere, start looking at data, right? Data speaks, not, it's always great to feel with our hearts. And a lot of times that's where that misalignment comes from. Like, I just feel with my heart, I did it this way, I like this person, it's a big glossy curriculum. But I think that you do, I mean, that is reality for a lot of people of how do you get aligned? And it's a very systematic process to get aligned. And so I think the first thing is to start with what you have. And I think that is actually for me, we've probably all been in that situation. I think the hardest part is just starting, knowing where to start. And so you give up before you even go because you're like, well, nobody's aligned. Where do I start? I'm here, but I need the district leaders above me to get on board. Well, you have a lot of people somewhere with a growth mindset that is ready to help you build that culture. And if you're systematic about it, and you use your data to speak, then you can very slowly kind of whack those weeds to the path you're trying to build. And it may take some time, but in a systematic way, eventually you'll get there. So that would be my first thing to say is just take a deep breath and start with what you have, and you will be able to influence the culture, and have sound evidence-based practices in literacy, hopefully in all subject areas and in learning. So,
I love that because we're all passionate about it because it's our learners and that's
mhm.
important. And everyone's coming to it from such a great lens to support students, but using the data, creating that culture, debating and aligning. I love it. This is what I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on. This is something I've supported a lot of, so I want to hear your district lens on it. What is the biggest mistake districts make during the pilot period, and how can they ensure the data they gather helps them make an informed decision? Jill, we'll start with you.
Okay, big question. So I thought of a few, but to start with, I think being clear on the purpose of the pilot, that it's not an evaluation of teachers, do you like this? You know, we hear that a lot. Do you like it? Well, we're going to get a lot of different opinions from teachers. So being very clear on the pilot, and I think a mistake would be to not use a clear evaluation tool with criteria like the Reading League, because that really guides what we're looking for. That it's aligned to the science of reading, it is aligned to the research with engagement, all of those components that we would want and are looking for in the curriculum. So being very clear on that with the teachers, even reminding them if you have those touch points with them, and then when they go to evaluate, it's not, what do you think of this? You know, does it align to the research? Does this improve student outcomes? Does this support strong Tier 1 instruction? Those are the questions to keep in the forefront. So that it doesn't lead to a decision based on opinion and, do they like it? Even questions as we were going through the evaluation, they were talking about maybe a scope and sequence. And I said, okay, but do you see it? Do you see it there? Yes, I see it. So guiding those teachers back to your criteria, back to that purpose. I would say if depending on the time frame, if you have longer to do the pilot, I feel like that is more effective rather than shorter. We did a 15-week. We actually went through a 2-year process. It's a very long. There was a couple of reasons for that. That's a very long process. It was a very thorough process. But giving the pilot teachers and educators enough time to be able to see those components that you're evaluating within that criteria, within that evaluation tool. And then also working with the company, with the vendor, to ensure that you have, a pilot, sometimes they give you some of the materials. And if, from experience, if the teachers and our pilot educators don't have what is really in that curriculum, they're not going to be able to evaluate it to that full extent as effectively. So that would be another thing to think about when you're going through that process, to make sure that you have, we say the Cadillac version of give me your Cadillac version of the pilot so that we can make an informed decision. If there's readers, if there's big books, the teachers need all those pieces.
I was going to ask how long you typically piloted for, so you read my mind.
That is, in the past, we haven't typically piloted for 2 years. We just, again, a couple different reasons that we did, and we had the time. Now that we have in Michigan, this legislation, we do have districts going through a speedy pilot process. So if that's the case, you can still put some of these really critical components, I think, in place. We did 15-week pilots with each when we narrowed it down to 2. We did 15 weeks each.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'll just add that it's important to instruct the curriculum as it's intended to be taught during pilots. And so a lot of times when we pilot things, we like to selectively or strategically pilot it in certain grade levels or a certain campus, certain groups. We know sometimes if they're reluctant and they close their door and don't teach it, then it's hard to get a good, authentic view of a pilot. And so just being a little bit more strategic with some of those implementations has been successful, or learning curve that we've experienced.
Do you have teachers volunteer for the pilot to help ensure that? Are you selecting them?
Yeah, so we like to volunteer instead of voluntold, because at the end of the day, at our level, we sometimes talk about people they buy into something when their boss tells them that this is something you have to do. But when they believe in it, that means they're going to close their door and they're going to teach it because they truly believe that that's what's the best curriculum or the best way to do it. And so the management is a little bit different when people believe in something versus when they're bought in.
Agree. And then you have those experts if you do decide to move forward that they've already used it and they have that experience.
Yeah, and I think so. Sometimes we strategically like to get some stronger voices that we know are a leader on campus as well. And then it helps others follow suit as they speak and believe in the program themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead, Jill.
During the pilot process, I just wanted to add, we did do, I mentioned it real quick, but the check-ins. I think the check-ins were really helpful for the teachers. And I say educators because we had special ed and, and our ML teachers as well. But those check-ins, we did one in person and then one virtual. Those are the opportunities the teachers were saying, well, I don't see this. We were able to then ask, do you have this in the curriculum? Is this something that we didn't get in part of the pilot process? But again, just having those touch points and those check-ins to support the teachers, because it is, the teachers do have the sense of weight on their shoulders as part of those decision makers in evaluating the curriculum for the entire district. So those check-ins I found were very helpful for support.
That makes sense. Good call out, Jill. I could keep going about the pilot, but I'm going to keep moving. Maybe we'll do a follow-up on this. Next one is, how do you select a program that provides enough guardrails for, and we've already kind of touched on this, but guardrails for consistency across the district without making teachers feel like script reading robots? Josh, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I think strong curriculum should function like a well-designed highway, not a restrictive rail. Jill put a plug in from Michigan earlier, so I'll note that we're from Texas, and out near Austin, there's a tollway, and I think the speed limit on it is like 85. And so we really want to ensure, whether you're a first-year teacher or 30-year veteran, if you're a novice driver, we don't want to get someone on a highway and obstruct the flow of traffic. And so um, we just like to clarify the destination and essential path, but not dictate every single turn. And so we do that by defining non-negotiables, some of the standard alignment, lesson sequence, assessment cadence. But ultimately, we try to empower teachers to adapt how they teach. So maybe what lane they drive in, the exact speed, but not what they teach. And so that's how we feel like we can, help support equitable instruction across all of our classrooms.
I like it. Jill, Amber, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, as far as kind of the view taken on the script, just trying to emphasize to our teachers that script or that lesson plan that they're given from the curriculum, kind of viewing that as like the metaphor of like hiking on a trail, like that script or that lesson plan is the trail. Like if I'm going to go on a hike, I'm going to make sure I stay on the trail, but then I'm going to have to decide like how much water do I need to bring, what shoes do I need to wear, like if I'm bringing someone on the hike with me, like what kind of support do they need. So really trying to emphasize like the purpose of that. So I need to make sure, like if I'm thinking of structured literacy, I really need to make sure that I am like following that program and explaining that and being very explicit and true to the program. However, I still have that freedom to make in fact, the program has taken that hard work, that cognitive piece out of it for me. So I can do what I am the expert in, which is like, is my student getting that? And now what do I need to do because they aren't? What tools do I need to provide for them? So, I mean, just kind of even changing that mindset shift of even seeing that as a script and more of like a cleared pathway for you to be the expert to do your job. So you're not having to do all of that work. It's already done for you. And not meaning that the work's done for you because we don't think you can do it. The work's done for you so you can do what we believe that you can do. So.
Yeah. And then things that we've already heard throughout the conversation today, then we're ensuring every classroom is the same for our students. It comes back to that note that you all have mentioned of we have to try this, we have to trust the process in order to evaluate if this is working or not. That script really helps support all of those elements and take some of that load off of teachers. Now, buying the books is the easy part. That's what we have written here. I think that's not necessarily easy, but it's part of it, right? Another difficult part we need to think about, how do you plan and budget for the multi-year professional learning required to make an adoption stick, make it long lasting? We'll start with Jill.
I think Amber's response is a good segue into this because um, we remind teachers too. I think we have to be very explicit in reminding them. They take it very literal. We want them, to follow the curriculum with integrity, sometimes fidelity, fidelity, but we like the word integrity. They take it very literal. So providing that ongoing professional learning helps them and supports educators to make those instructional decisions when they need to. So it's a good segue. And we embed professional learning within our district calendar. We have set days in our calendar that we have district-wide professional development. So when we know we're adopting a new curriculum, whether it is ELA, math, science, social studies, we're planning ahead. So we're designating those days for that professional learning. We invest in literacy coaches. So that ongoing professional learning that's very impactful. We're very fortunate that we have literacy coaches at every building. In my district, we have 25 buildings. We're a very large district in Michigan. Michigan has invested in early literacy and coaching so that professional learning is embedded professional learning as well within the classroom. And we also have a state network of coaching so that professional learning just helps drive the professional learning in the district, and then providing professional learning for administrators. We kind of touched on this. So that ongoing, professional learning for administrators as well. Josh mentioned, the look fors. What are they looking for? As many are shifting from maybe perhaps balanced literacy to structured literacy, administrators, need that pedagogy and professional learning as well to support them, to support the teachers.
I think I speak for everyone when I say I'm impressed by that many literacy coaches. That is something to really celebrate.
We have increased across the state over the last 2 to 3 years to a couple hundred coaches. And then we have designated, I'm also a designated county, they call them educators on loan. So we have county professional learning, and then we're part of our state coaching network learning. So we are hearing from experts in the field, like Nell Duke, of course, some of our homegrown experts, but we hear from other literacy experts across the nation too, as part of our professional learning at the state network. Anita Archer. Yes.
My
So we're
favorite.
doing great professional learning at the state level to support this legislation and this shift. Because a lot of times, we have the legislation and the laws. Of course, we need more. We know we need more funding, but we are seeing in Michigan that they are putting some things in place to support the professional learning starting at the state level.
So I'm hearing curriculum specific training, I'm hearing job embedded coaching, and then more overarching best practices, researchers. This is related to my next question, so I'll stay on you for a second, Jill. Beyond just training those new teachers each year, because we have to, of course, get them up and running, but how are you structuring that professional learning for those returning teachers to dive deeper into elements?
So this year we initiated, started with an initiative with literacy leaders. So we have to build capacity because over time, really, we want to build capacity within the classrooms where we have literacy coaches that are supporting that work. And we have a student-centered coaching model in the county and at the state level, but building that capacity. So we started literacy leaders. We do them in grade bands, so 4th and 5th grade. So we are deepening their knowledge of the curriculum. Also the pedagogy, the instructional practices. So I'm doing some training on explicit instruction with Anita Archer's work. So just giving them, again, that deeper knowledge, and then we're going to move to learning labs. That is the goal. So we've initiated some learning labs. Again, that is a state initiative coming down through the coaching network so that they have that deeper knowledge. They can share it with their colleagues. So right now, this year, we started with 4th and 5th grade. We usually start with kindergarten, 1st grade. That always seems to be right. Well, we're going to start with kindergarten, 1st grade. But we started with 4th and 5th grade, especially with new curriculum. It tends to be a very heavier lift in 4th and 5th grade. So we started with the fourth and fifth grade. We have one representative from each of our 25 elementary buildings. And then we will continue. We have a 3-year plan for that. So we will continue to bring them in, and then we will start second and third grade and then K1.
That's incredible. Those are skills that those teachers will be able to take with them throughout their career. And as a former fourth grade teacher, thank you for not forgetting those upper
Yeah.
grades. Josh, Amber, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first thing is just making sure you are very intentional in having a systematic plan. So it's not just the first year or second year. Like you have an actual long-term plan. So maybe the first couple of years you really are focused on the curriculum, the new curriculum that you are implementing, and then of course sustaining that as far as you getting new teachers in. How are you going to be bringing those new teachers up to speed with the new curriculum? And hopefully that will build the culture of this is the curriculum we teach, this is how we teach it within the building. But then also having that sustainable plan then of, okay, now our teachers understand the curriculum, how to use it. The culture is built there. This is the curriculum we are using, and that we know that we're going to be training new teachers as we come up. But now we need to deepen kind of what we talked about before, deepen that knowledge. So what now does that look like? And do we have a sustainable plan from there? So how do we deepen the knowledge? Why do we teach the curriculum this way? Why is it important? Why can we not let, these go? And then building, like Jill was saying, I think the biggest part of that is building capacity. So I can bring in, which you should, if you can, bring in the companies, teach the curriculum. But the more district facilitators and leaders that I can build within my district, the more sustainable I can make that. So even starting with we're right now we have a district literacy plan where we started with 2 district facilitators doing some science of reading training. I think we're up to like 10 district facilitators. So we're able to do large cohorts of teachers, training large cohorts of teachers. And now we're able to put in that sustainable plan for 7 years or more, knowing that all of our new teachers now will be able to get trained. So I would say the biggest piece of that is having an actual long-term plan that you stick with, because sometimes it feels like it's going to fall apart, but if you stick with it, it'll work. And then building as much capacity as you can with your leaders that have a growth mindset. If you build the capacity, that's what creates the sustainability, not can't rely on the money, right? Like you use the money when you have it, but use the money really well and intentionally to build the capacity that you need.
That's right. Good. How do you prevent an adoption from becoming, I think this is entirely related. How do you prevent that new curriculum from becoming shelfware within that first 3 years? We want a sustainable implementation roadmap. Josh, what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, schools oftentimes spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on curriculum, and I think shelfware is really about the product. It's almost always about the leadership lift. And so, as we talked earlier about build a visible implementation roadmap, and so what that looks for at Chapel Hill, we define look fors, protect instructional time. We monitor fidelity, as Jill said, integrity, just celebrating exemplars, addressing resistance early. Those are some of those key strategies that we've worked through. What we find in real world that works good for us is curriculum-based PLCs. And so that's where our teachers are able to come together and focus on lesson internalization, lesson rehearsal. We talked about guardrails. And so that's where teachers can discuss curriculum-based professional development. And so oftentimes we do cooperative learning, Kagan structured strategies, and so they can navigate those things. Amber spoke about a hiking trail and what shoes a teacher may want to wear. Well, oftentimes that's where veterans can just provide feedback. Hey, girl, if you put on those sandals, there are a pebble path up here, and it's not the mountain that's going to kill you, but it's those pebbles in your shoes. And your kids are going to go crazy during this lesson if you try that. And so I think that just, helps us, maintain equitable instruction again. And, defining those look fors are key because at a specialist level, we know what it should look for, but we're not there every day and able to lead that implementation. So we've got to grow leaders alongside us.
Absolutely. Amber, anything you would add to that? Okay. Not, and you as well, Jill? Okay. Last question I had, and then we'll see which ones we had from the chat. If a curriculum leader could only look at one non-negotiable factor when choosing a program, what should it be? Only one. Amber, we'll start with you.
Oh, that's a hard question. Only one. So I'm gonna I'm gonna say one that's gonna be broad, right? So I can include all the things under it. So I would say the one thing is, does it follow the science? And of course, my reading hat's gonna say reading, but I'm not just gonna say reading. I'm gonna say, does it follow the science of reading and learning? Because you don't have the and learn. The science of reading is great. I know what happens in the brain. We know how kids learn to read, but is the learning piece there? Are students engaged? What does the cognitive science say about instruction? And so the science of both reading and learning have to be there as an explicit, systematic instruction. Are the students responding all the time to the teacher? Are they doing the heavy lifting? Is that being stored in their long-term memory? So does it follow the science of reading and learning would be the non-negotiable that I would look for.
So Amber took the answer of science and reading and science of learning. To add on to that, Josh and Jill, what would be one other thing you think is just non-negotiable?
I would say the science of writing. So I would add the writing, definitely explicit and embedded and intentional. So reading and writing are reciprocal. So looking at that would be a non-negotiable. Science of reading, science of writing. What does the writing look like along with the reading?
I guess this is what happens when you go last. It's tough to follow those super intelligent women. But I think, we talked about frameworks, research-based instructional strategies, and if you do the groundwork on the front end, then when you start to adopt curriculum, like does it align to best research-based instructional strategies, and are we teaching the way we should be teaching?
Absolutely. Great answers, everyone. And we looked in our Q&A bank and we had one comment that I wanted to share. And they said, believe in versus buy in. So good. Our attendees loved that quote. So thank you, all of you. I know your districts are so lucky to have leaders that bring in full communities to make these decisions, thoughtfully bringing in that professional learning, considering all of the elements. So just thank you for all you're doing to impact your communities. As we wrap up, again, once again, thank you to our experts. We're so thankful for your time and your busy days. You're all joining us from these school buildings. They were worried about the announcements coming in, those walkie-talkies coming in. They are in there doing the thing. They'll go do bus duty after this, I'm sure. So Amber, Josh, and Jill, once again, thank you for your time and for the perspective you shared today. The work is complex, and your honesty about what it really takes to choose and implement a strong curriculum was very helpful. To everyone who joined us, we want to leave you with a practical resource that you can take with you back to your team. We created a guide for choosing the right reading curriculum with key questions and look-fors to support you through the adoption process. So you can scan this QR code right here, and we'll also be sure to send out the recording and this resource to your email. Thank you everyone again for being here, and thank you for all you do to support strong literacy instruction for your students. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.